Hi guys, I trust this finds you well. Welcome to Mzansi and USA News. Today we are going to be doing Action SA's 2024 Election Manifesto. Now we are 2 days shy of our elections. Let's get into it. That's the face of the leader, Herman Mashaba. Okay, they have 9 priorities as they've listed here. We're obviously not going to do all 9 priorities. Action SA's 9 priorities to fix South Africa. There they are. We're obviously not going to do all of them. We'll focus on the similar ones that we focused on with the other political parties. Number 1 is the economic growth that creates employment. Opportunities. Economic growth that creates employment opportunities. South Africa's lack of economic growth has worsened the pervasive poverty and wealth inequality in our country. Over 40% of South Africans, or almost 12 million job seekers, cannot find work. We must prioritize the expansion of South Africa's economy to enable job creation. I can't agree with that more. Action SA envisions a responsible free market economy that is concerned with growth and prosperity for all South Africa. Hallelujah to that. Achieving this means that the barriers to economic growth must be removed to encourage entrepreneurship and new job opportunities. Remember when I was doing the ACDP one yesterday or day before, I said to you that we would look at 2 more free market economy because we have looked at 3 communist manifestos, the ANC, the EFF, and the MK. So far, we've only looked at ACDP, that is free market economy. Here, this is the second one. The last one, which we'll do either tonight or tomorrow morning, is the DA one. Okay, so let's proceed. Now, improved economic infrastructure. Economic infrastructure that support business. The success of our economy depends on monitoring critical infrastructure. We will ensure, I said monitoring. No, that's not what's written there. I think I need to enlarge this or get myself some better glasses than the ones that I'm wearing. Okay, jokes aside, economic infrastructure that supports business. This is very, very important because you would have seen in the previous manifestos that I've done that I have emphasized the point of our infrastructure that leads to companies like ArcelorMittal wanting out and having to retrench so many people. The success of our economy depends on maintaining critical infrastructure. We will ensure that South African businesses prosper by investing in projects that develop reliable electricity supply, transport, and telecommunication. Action SA will improve economic infrastructure by instituting regulatory reforms. Let's hear what they have to say here. We'll enhance the value derived from investments in public infrastructure by reforming the Protection of Investment Act of 2015 to reduce bureaucratic barriers and remove excessive limitations to foreign direct investment. Do you hear that? So this is our domain as capitalists. We obviously want to remove barrier to entry, deregularize, remove regulation that creates this red tape, contrary to what the communists always seek to do, to control business and tell business what to do. We will reform preferential procurement regulations to reduce corruption and procurement inefficiencies by focusing solely on efficient service delivery criteria. This will improve the investment environment and attract more international and local investment into the public infrastructure projects. I subscribe to that 100%. Upgrading transport infrastructure. We will launch a public works program to upgrade high-volume rail networks and national and provincial roads. Action SA will integrate rural roads that serve agriculture and mining sectors with rail networks to improve transport of goods. I would love to know how they are going to do this. This is where now I would obviously want to have some questions because whilst we all proclaim that we are capitalists, some capitalists don't mind to increase taxes, and I'm not for that. But hitherto, Action SA has said nothing about increasing taxes. As a matter of fact, they've just spoken about deregulating. Let's proceed. Advancing telecommunication infrastructure. We will develop network infrastructure for underserved communities by partnering with the private sector and improving existing government programs to deliver broadband internet connectivity to low-income households. This will empower people to develop their skills, their digital skills, and increase access to economic opportunities. Obviously, these things are going to need money, but you hear what he's saying. They are going to partner with the private sector in this area. Investing in catalytic projects, Action SA will implement a targeted public works program by investing in projects that have a high potential for job creation, economic growth, and economic competitiveness. Action SA's plans to increase economic growth with catalytic projects. We will invest in the extension of the Seshen, Saldanha, and Limpopo KwaZulu-Natal rail lines to increase exports and economic activity in the mining and industrial sectors. We will expand and improve seaports in Durban and Richards Bay to increase local and international trade. We will utilize South Africa's partnership with SADC and free trade measures established by AFCFTA to expand South Africa's sea and rail corridors. This will improve South Africa's trade with markets in East and West Africa. Okay. Now, every time you hear somebody talking about investment, you must ask yourself, where is that money going to come from? It's obviously going to come from the tax, but hopefully within the current bracket of tax without increasing our tax rebates or VAT for that matter, or any other tax which we pay. Small business development, entrepreneur-led growth. An Action SA-led government will support business innovators and potential job creators, not needlessly restricting them. I can't agree more. We will invest in entrepreneurial funding by allocating 30% of all income generated by Opportunity Fund towards this initiative. Now, an opportunity fund is something that they speak about somewhere in this manifesto that they are going to create, where they tax business 5% to create a specific fund. Now, I'm telling you that because I've read their manifesto, even though for the purpose of this discussion, I'm not going to read all of it. SMME funding. We will enhance an investment into SMMEs by introducing targeted investment vehicles that have reduced capital gains tax rates. This is beautiful, to be honest with you, because, people can just by mere amount of tax that they have to pay when they sell capital assets, that decision alone can force them to decide not to invest, to simply keep the money in their bank account. You get the point? Look at our property business. There's a lot of people are sitting on their cash because of the capital gains tax, which is attached to selling a property. Do not forget that every time you sell a property, you have to pay capital gains tax. So this will be a welcome reduction in capital gains. Empowering the informal economy. We will invest in economic infrastructure and increase community safety to improve the informal business environment. We will enforce and increase police presence in informal settlements to prevent crime and maintain safe environments for business and their customers. This is much needed. And in the process of increasing the police visibility, obviously it means we'll increase the police force. That will then absorb most of the youth that are currently loitering around looking for what only God knows. Affordable business spaces. An Action SA government will transform South Africa's cities into inclusive economic centers by reclaiming hijacked buildings and unused factories for private sector development. Buildings will be developed for mixed use and provide affordable renting opportunities for businesses. Now, if Mashaba's mayor days are anything to go by, we can take that to the bank. The man is a businessman, is business oriented in the spirit of his mind, or in the attitude of his mind, and therefore he means what he says, right? We have seen this when he was a mayor. We have seen this during his Black Like Me days. Let's proceed. Labor market reform to increase employment opportunities. Stable employment is one of the best ways to achieve financial success. We will make it easier for employers to hire new staff members by reforming the Basic Conditions of Employment Act of 1997 to reduce employers' burden regarding the dismissal of non-performing employees. Hallelujah. You know how difficult it is to dismiss employees in South Africa? I'm talking about people who are not performing. Do you know the onus of the burden of proof that is upon the employer to prove to the courts, to the CCMA, to the bargaining council when an employer is non-performing? an employee is not non-performing. There's so much that the only way it's easy to dismiss an employee is through insubordination. Okay, which of course can be challenged as well, but nevertheless, predominantly that's what seemingly most organizations have decided to settle on because of the burden of proof that squarely lies on the one who alleges. Obviously, the Employment Equity Act, I think it's paragraph 11, says he who alleges must prove. I stand to be corrected in terms of the paragraph, but the onus to prove is on the one who's making the allegation. And of course, I'm not saying employees should be dismissed willy-nilly. However, it shouldn't be that difficult to dismiss an employee who's non-performing. You simply need to be able to prove that, because that does hamper progress of business. It does hamper business growth. It does hamper profit making, and therefore possible future investment in other business endeavors. That's how we look at it, or that's how I look at it. Then he says SMME exemption. We will exempt SMMEs within the first 2 years of operations from restrictive labor and financial reporting requirements. This allows businesses to allocate more of their time and resources towards becoming profitable and expanding. There you go. Thereby doing what? Creating more employment. Minimum wage reform. This is a much required reform, and I would obviously agree with anybody who wants to reform minimum wage in the correct direction. And because Mashaba is not a communist, I don't expect anything worse than what I would have expected out of myself. Let's go through that. We will reform the national minimum wage regulations to encourage the employment of young South Africans who are struggling to gain employment. Action SA will implement a minimum wage system that calculates wage based on the upper bound poverty line relative to the years of work experience. You see, this is a serious barrier to entry. I did indicate to you guys that I'll do at some point in time when I'm done with all these manifestos, minimum wage. I would encourage, because I will disagree with what they are saying here, I would encourage Mashaba and his team to investigate this subject more. Minimum wage is a barrier to entry for youngsters who have absolutely no experience. Observe what they are saying, that we will be calculate wages based on the upper bound poverty line relative to years of work experience. What about those who don't have experience? Can you see that? And this is what the unions are not paying attention to when they talk about minimum wage. Okay? And minimum wage has, I don't want to spend time on minimum wage now, but it has a serious negative repercussions or connotation for the poor. Please bear that in mind. All these so-called communist interventions that are seeking to uplift the poor from poverty, they are literally entrenching the poor into poverty. Reforming the roles of unions. Action SA acknowledges the important roles unions must play in our economy. You know what? I'm going to leave it to Mashaba. I don't see any role unions must play in our economy. That's my view. But I think he's got a different view. Perhaps somebody has prevailed on him, or I don't know, you could even say maybe a voice of reason. I don't know. Let's find out. While we will continue to treat the unions as valued partner, they will no longer be allowed to have a veto right over economic policy decisions. I love it. I love it. I love it. I thought, you know what? Remember what I said. I don't see the role of unions, to be honest with you. I think that unions are overemphasized. They are esteemed highly for no apparent reason, because we have a constitutional democracy. Every employee can literally go on a legal strike in South Africa. Okay, there is lots of disadvantages in being unionized than being ununionized if you are a professional individual. Okay, they are very unhelpful, very unhelpful. Perhaps I should do a separate video that talks about how useless unions can be. I'm not making a promise on that because it's going to attract unnecessary attention as well. Now, global trade expansion, I'm not going to do that. Rural economic development, okay, perhaps I should do the rural economic development because it will obviously indicate whether people would want to vote for a party like that or not. Agricultural land reform will transfer unused arable land owned by the state to emerging farmers. Farmers will be presented with long-term leases that permit them to buy the land after 5 years of successfully operating their farms. Okay, now you can already see the difference, that it's a short-term lease geared towards them owning the land. It's not the 99-year lease of the EFF where you never get to own the land. Okay, the EFF did not use the term 99-year, but I mean, they own the land, all the land. So you can never get to own the land if you go and elect EFF as the governing party in this country. Diversify. No. Let's get to expand. We will implement agricultural internship and mentorship that build commercial farming skills among emerging farmers to encourage the successful growth of agricultural businesses. Very, very, very important if we are to sustain our food and we don't go into food shortages. Expand trade in rural areas. We will invest in road, rail, water, electricity, and fast internet infrastructure that serve rural economies. This will establish stronger trade connection between rural farmers and producers with markets where they sell their goods. Brilliant, but you need to indicate where is the funding going to come from. I'd love to know where is the funding for this going to come from. Diversify. I'm up to it. I'm into it. However, I always need to know where is the funding going to come from. I don't want anything that's going to increase tax. Diversify rural economies. Farming is important to rural economies, but there is a room for more diverse employment opportunities. We will implement programs in rural communities to fully develop the economic potential of agriculture, including agro-processing, mining, and energy industries. Rural tourism. Local tourism supports local economies. We will increase rural tourism by collaborating with provincial tourism agencies and improving public transport to enhance accessibility to remote tourist destinations. A much more welcome change. Private sector partnership. Enhance support for public-private partnerships. We will allow the private sector to play a more involved role in infrastructure by reducing the legal and regulatory complexity of public-private partnerships. We will adopt a private sector participation framework that empowers the private sector to be involved in transport infrastructure, renewable energy, and expansion of telecommunication infrastructure. Business-friendly urban centers will provide tax incentive for new businesses and international companies establishing operations in our cities. Governmental and municipal processes relating to doing business will be simplified by removing the red tape. I can simply say amen to that. That's all I can say to that. Improved collaboration. We will ensure that upskilling and the transfer of knowledge are incorporated in public-private partnerships. Okay. This is a roadmap to 4.8 million sustainable jobs created by 2029. 4.8 million, that's 5 million jobs. Once in government, Action SA will implement a broad range of economic reforms to create conducive environment to economic growth, largely driven by increased performance of private sector. Together, we expect these initiatives to result in 4.8 million new jobs by 2029. In 2024, Action SA will immediately implement priority regulatory reforms that address restrictive labor laws, adopt strategic infrastructure investment master plan, and launches a comprehensive plan to address corruption in the public sector. Increased business confidence is expected to lead a 2% increase in year-on-year jobs created compared to Q4 of 2023. In 2025, Action SA will pass its first national budget, reprioritizing government spending to strategic infrastructure and improve service delivery. The widespread capacitation of the state. Okay, I think they wanted to say capacitation there. Capitation. Okay, I think that's what they wanted to say. The widespread capacitation of the state and entrepreneurship support mechanism is expected to result in another 4% growth in job creation. When I read that, my understanding was they are saying they will capacitate the state. By 2026, the economic impact of regulatory and fiscal reforms, the pace of infrastructure development, and increased business confidence that improves South Africa's trade balance sheet are expected to result in 5% growth in year-on-year job creation. Well, that is yet to be seen, isn't it? However, as a true capitalist in mind, and in action myself, I would agree that it would certainly improve a lot. I'm not sure if it will get to 5% within that short period of time, but it will certainly improve our economic growth without a doubt, if they were to implement these reforms and austerity measures in government spending and focus more where the money is supposed to be geared to be spent, not spent on things that are completely useless that the politicians love to participate in. Job growth should peak in 2027 at 6% as South Africa reestablishes itself as a leading development economy, attracting significant FDI that boosts local companies. Okay, by 2028 and 29, the economic reforms, infrastructure investment, skills development programs, industry support mechanisms, and improved market access reforms mature, resulting in year-on-year job growth stabilizing at approximately 5%. In total, 4.8 million new sustainable jobs will be added to South Africa's economy, resulting in a record low unemployment rate of 17.5. Look, the only way we can know this to be true is if Action SA were to be given an opportunity to put their economic strategic plans into place. We have no way of knowing this because, you see, we gave the African National Congress so many years to do what they had promised in their manifestos, and we never penalized them for failing. And I think this is very important because when you look in these manifestos, some of the figures, for me, I can see how they are anticipating the growth, but remember, economic growth is not necessarily a science. If it was a science, it would be so easy to do. It obviously takes a certain knowledge, which Mashaba has as a business person. Hence, his figures are, for me, believable. I've seen this with Donald Trump. That's why it's easy to believe Mashaba's figures. That's why it's difficult for me to believe the figures that the communists are putting on the table, because all I have seen in communist countries, Venezuela, Cuba, you name them, including Russia, China, when it was under communism, was death of the economy, not growth. Okay? China has since improved, since it adopted these very principles Mashaba is discussing here. Economic inclusion that achieves economic justice. Okay, we're going to go into what is it that they're going to do. Inclusive economic empowerment. Action SA supports the economic empowerment of historically disadvantaged South Africans. We will address the legacy of apartheid and the increasing economic inequality faced by marginalized South Africans with the introduction of Inclusive Economic Empowerment Act. This includes establishing an opportunity fund. Remember what I told you what the opportunity fund was earlier on before we got here, as I said, because I had already read this. This includes establishing an opportunity fund to increase access to opportunities for inclusive economic empowerment and ensure quality of opportunity as opposed to equality of outcome. I can't agree with that more. Once again, that's simply because I'm a capitalist. Okay? The proceeds from the Opportunity Fund will be used to invest in programs that promote the empowerment of Black, Colored, Indian, and Asian South Africans who remain disadvantaged. Will replace the compliance cost of existing empowerment legislation estimated at 4 to 6% of companies' profits with an Opportunity Fund levy. This introduces a 5% company tax for all companies, excluding SMMEs, and is projected to raise about 55.7 billion rands annually for the fund's inclusive empowerment initiatives. This is a very, very good idea if it could be gotten off the ground to work. Introduce the Opportunity Fund Bill into Parliament to establish the fund as an independent tax-exempt legal entity registered with FSCA. Appoint qualified and experienced professionals to manage the Opportunity Fund, good, not politicians, and ensure the board of directors functions without political interference. I'm for that. Secure funding by introducing the Opportunity Fund levy, which is 5% company tax for all companies excluding SMMEs. Now, Remember, company tax in South Africa during apartheid was at 40%. It was reduced to 28%, right? So Mashaba putting this levy, it will take it now to 33%, right? Assuming that he doesn't give them certain tax benefits elsewhere, right? Let's proceed. This will raise approximately 55.7 billion per year for inclusive economic empowerment initiatives. This levy will be implemented for a maximum of 30 years and will replace the compliance cost of existing empowerment legislation, estimated at 4 to 6% of a company profits. Secure additional funding through donations and low-interest loans. Redirect grants paid to entities such as NYDA, the NEF, CETA to the fund. Empower previously disadvantaged South Africans by allocating 10% of the income generated by the Opportunity Fund to tertiary education, 30% towards entrepreneurial funding, 35% towards infrastructure projects, and 25% towards further investment. This is a game changer, guys. This is a game changer. You can see that this is somebody who knows what they are talking about, right? It will certainly improve. That money is not just going to be chowed. It's not just going to be given to certain individuals, and there's no expectation that those individuals should deliver. Not at all. Let's proceed. Universal basic income stimulus. Now, this sounds like a communist ideology to me, but let's hear them out. We acknowledge that seeking employment or building a business costs money. For this reason, we will introduce a universal basic income stimulus to alleviate poverty and support vulnerable citizens' participation in the economy. We will provide cash payments to all South Africans who register to receive the universal basic income stimulus to invest in their economic empowerment and stimulate the economic growth. I want to hear this out. Be provided to all adult South Africans and permanent residents who register as UBIS recipients. But what is required for people to register for this? Why is this necessary? Be initiated through legislation and be implemented in 2025 with the passing of the new administration's first budget. The implementation of the UBIS is subject to the adoption of financing mechanism that will ensure financial feasibility and sustainability, okay? The UBIS, which is linked to poverty bans, will initially be paid for a period of 3 years through monthly cash transfers consisting of 790 in the first year, 1101 in the second year, 1622 in the third year. Through the multiplier effect, this is expected to increase the growth of South Africa's economy by at least 2 additional percentage points measured against the projected GDP growth. This is calculated to create an additional 1.6 million jobs. How, Mashaba? How are you going to do that just by simply giving people? Let's hear your rationale of Action SA's UBIS payments. UBIS payments amounts have been calculated based on the most recent 2023 national poverty lines and have additionally been adjusted to account for inflation in 2024 prices of consumer goods. The payment of 790 in the first year of our implementation of the UBIS is consistent with South Africa's food poverty line. This refers to the amount of money a person needs to afford to feed themselves daily. The second year of UBIS payments will consist of 1101, which is based on the lower bound poverty line. The figure accounts for money spent on both food and non-food items at the lower bound poverty level. The third year UBIS payments will be 1622 based on the upper bound poverty line. This accounts for the amount of money required for spending on food and non-food items at the upper bound poverty level. Action SA will ensure that UBIS payments are increased over time to account for inflation and adjustments to the national standard of poverty line. But I still don't understand the rationale behind it. Why do we need it? Why do we need it? Because you see, it's very, very important for government to create employment and not to create more fund. This is called universal basic income stimulus. This sounds very, very spooky to me. I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe I have failed to understand it the first time that I read it, but up until now, I'm not happy with it. Let's proceed. Maintain social grants. Action SA will ultimately work towards eliminating broad reliance on social grants. Action SA will ultimately aim to reduce broad reliance on social grants through the achievement of economic prosperity and justice for all. However, we will increase existing social grants alongside the introduction of the UBIs to protect the most vulnerable in society from the effects of poverty. Where is the money going to come from, Mashaba? Distributing social grants. Action SA will improve the fair and timely distribution of social grants by implementing prioritized institutional reform programs of South African Security Agency to eliminate corruption and bureaucratic inefficiencies and improve access to social grants. Implementing technological solutions such as mobile payments and e-wallet so grant recipients can access their funds more easily. Conduct regular reviews of the grant system to ensure our people continue to have access to the social support grants they need. Prosecuting any individual businesses or organizations that exploit, steal from, or financially abuse grant recipients and holding individuals who abuse the grant system to account. Okay, look, Action SA here, for me, they've just lost what to call my potential vote. I wouldn't recommend any organization that is seeking to keep the social grant and introduce another income stimulus unless they explain how that will not result into taxpayer being taxed more. Why? This is very important. You can speak all the English you want. If you are increasing tax, you necessarily are opening up a door for those who are taxpayers to leave your country. Make no mistake about it. You are opening that door. You are encouraging people to leave your country. Nevertheless, let's proceed. Empowering marginalized groups, gender and racial equality will eliminate racial and gender biases in the workplace by enforcing harsh penalties on companies found guilty of racism, sexism, and discriminatory practices. Youth empowerment. We will use proceeds from the Opportunity Fund to implement youth training programs focused on developing skills aligned with the needs of the economy. Action SA will also introduce a voluntary year of service for young people without a path to education or immediate job offer, helping them to gain additional skills to enter the job market and to address our disastrously high youth unemployment. Action SA will expand access to economic opportunities for our youth by ensuring that young people have access to further development opportunities by expanding access to zero-rated, not requiring data allowances, educational website and applications, implementing mentorship and leadership programs to equip the future generations with necessary leadership skills that will benefit society, organizing skills development workshops and social events at schools, libraries, and community centers, introducing a voluntary national service year for all South Africans when they turn 18 to provide work opportunities for all young people, expanding access to tertiary education by ensuring no academically qualifying student should be excluded from higher education due to funding constraints. Okay, look, the national service for me is more than welcome, without a doubt. It's something that I would certainly support. Let's get into housing. I'm just disappointed with the UBs and the increase on the grants. I'm not going to lie to you. Other than that, they were doing well until we touched on those two, unless I'm convinced otherwise. Housing, affordable urban housing. We will accelerate public housing developments in our cities, especially high-rise in urban centers. I didn't do housing for the ANC, EFF, as well as the MK. So it's only reasonable that I simply go to education, because I did energy, but they are all the same. When you look, you can read it for yourself. Sustainable energy system that ends load shedding. They are all the same when it comes to this. In terms of their interventions, they differ here and there. The energy, for example, the energy future and just transition, renewable energy, public participation, socially responsible transition. Can you see that? We'll implement the gradual transition from reliable and fossil fuels to using more renewable. We will implement the gradual transition from relying on fossil fuels to using more renewable energy sources for electricity generation. We are committed to promoting environmental sustainability and economic justice in our transition to renew energy, and will carefully consider the impact of renewable energy generation on the economy and mining communities. Can you see this? I do have a problem with this because I'm not quite sure if much thought have been applied to it. They shouldn't run away from the fact that nuclear energy is much cleaner and much more sustainable than solar and wind. It seems as though all these political parties are running away from that, and they're just sinking from the same hymn sheet. It's like copy paste, copy paste. That's why some people are saying these manifestos are not worth the paper they are written on. Global collaboration, the transition. Okay, I'm going to skip all of that because they have a 9-point plan to end load shedding. 1, end cadre deployment at ESCOM and ensure that the entity is staffed with highly skilled staff who are appointed based on merit and competency, not political affiliation. Agreed. Combat crime in the energy system. Agreed. Shield critical service from load shedding. Agreed. Decentralize the energy market. Decentralize microgrids are the future of energy, especially for rural communities. Not only rural communities. I mean, for example, some people have got too much energy already through their solar. The problem is in Gauteng, you can't sell that back to the municipality. You understand, this is something that the DA is already doing in the Western Cape, for an example. So it's not only rural areas. However, I agree with it. Establish a competitive energy market, harness solar power, gradually transition to using more renewable energy sources in our energy system to promote environmental sustainability while safeguarding communities relying on the coal mining industry for survival. This requires a much more objective study. We need not to be hoodwinked by the global warming alarmists. Okay? We need not to be hoodwinked by them. This is very, very important. I'm telling you, these are left-leaning politics in America. There is no right, sane person in America who talks this language. Engage with communities affected by the renewable energy transition to ensure that the needs of our people and economy are always prioritized. Very important. Enhance skills development by introducing specialized training programs that focus on building the skills needed to maintain South Africa's energy grid. Okay, quality education, brilliant. That would be my last point that I'm going to focus on this manifesto. Quality education for all. Early childhood development. Expanded support for ECD. Supporting children development is especially critical in the early childhood. This is when children develop strong cognitive and social foundation to serve them later in life, will enable the departments of social development and health to ensure that our ECD centers provide comprehensive services to support children from indigent household. Action SA will, now indigent are poor household, Action SA will ECD by increasing the budget allocation for ECD, that is early child development, and increasing funding for ECD centers so that parents of young children have affordable options for childcare and can participate in the economy productively. This will include funding for nutrition programs, feeding schemes to ensure that young children receive adequate nutrition in the formative years. Remove bureaucratic hurdles to ECD registration so that more ECD centers can legally register and access formal support and funding from government. Where is government going to get the money from? Action SA. Ensuring that there is adequate alignment between formal ECD initiatives so that children begin their learning journeys as young as possible. Providing further training opportunities to ECD practitioners, especially for those working in informal ECD centers. Expanding partnerships with private sector to allocate more resources to ECD centers in indigent areas. Now, I agree with almost everything they've said here, including the provision of the feeding schemes for children. However, I'm just concerned that they don't stipulate where is the funding going to come from, because this was very, very important for them to state. Ensuring equal access to schooling. Access to schools. No child should be prevented from getting an education because of financial or geographic limitations. We will implement learner transport programs to ensure children spend no more than an hour traveling to school, and we will further invest in the development of boarding houses. Sorry about that. we will Action SA will ensure that learners whose families, no, so I apologize. Let me go back. No child should be prevented from getting an education. I read that. We will implement a learner transport programs to ensure children spend no more than an hour traveling to school, and will further invest in the development of boarding houses so that children from remote areas can access quality education. Whilst I am for that, I still want to know, where is the money going to come from? If all of this can be achieved within the current MTEF, I'm game. I'm sold to it. And I think there is a need to say that, otherwise we're going to have problems. Nevertheless, because this is not a communist state that the Action SA will be running, we know that obviously there'll be a lot of sponsorship from private sector as well. Learning materials. Action SA will ensure that learners whose families are unable to provide learning materials are not left behind in their educational journeys and are provided with necessary educational resources. Action SA will streamline the delivery of study materials to ensure that learning and teaching schedules are not delayed unnecessarily. School infrastructure. Children deserve to attend safe and well-resourced schools that foster an environment conducive to learning. We will eradicate pit toilets and mud schools by providing safe and dignified bathrooms in all educational institutions. We will also invest in broadband internet access for all learners and ensure that all schools have running water and electricity. A single Department of Education. Improving the quality of South Africa's education system begins with institutional reform. We will merge the Department of Basic Higher Education and Training to improve alignment of education outcomes for learners across educational development. Remove undue union influence. Trade unions, particularly SATU, have been allowed to exercise undue influence over our education system for too long. Under Action SA government, SATU will no longer be allowed to hold the education system and the future of our children ransom. I agree with that 100%. Teacher support. We will increase the number of teachers and allocate more resources to schools by prioritizing an amendment of the salary structures for educators and allocating a sufficient budget to attract skilled professionals to the teaching profession. Action SA will aim to reduce the teacher to pupil ratio 1 to 25. You remember that the EFF had the same as well across South Africa public schools by supporting the growth of the educational workforce to improve the quality of teaching. This will be accomplished by reintroducing teacher training challenges. This will be accomplished by reintroducing teacher training colleges that provide Bachelor of Education courses and further training for teachers. Now, the African National Congress got rid of these years ago. Principal performance. Principals play an essential role in managing our schools. To ensure that our educational institutions are well managed, we will enforce strict compliance with minimum requirements for principals, including completion of school management training programs. Ethical education. Children should be encouraged to adopt moral values and ethical behavior in school to break the culture of crime and corruption in South Africa. Action SA will ensure that schools provide time at the start of each day for learners to practice quiet reflection and prayer. Numerical skills. Numeracy is an essential skill that needs to be fostered at the foundation phase. We'll introduce training to improve the ability of existing foundation phase teachers to teach numeracy at age-appropriate levels, and we will implement evidence-based teaching methods for numerical skills development. Reading for meaning. Reading for meaning is a foundational literacy skill that learners must develop to obtain an adequate understanding of materials they study throughout their educational journeys. Action SA will ensure that 90% of South Africa's learners will be able to read for meaning by the age 10 by 2025. Okay, look, that's not the end of it. That's them further detailing the numeracy, the reading for meaning. Can you see that? Introduce in-service training to improve numerical skills of existing foundation phase teachers to empower them to teach children numeracy at age-appropriate level. Implement evidence-based teaching methods for numerical skill development. Introduce technological tools to classrooms to improve children's numerical skills. Encourage school partnerships with private sector and civil society to get involved in numeracy training for young children. Offer numerical skills development support to parents to empower them to help their children develop numerical skills. Now, this is an answer to a question I had asked in one of the manifestos. How will parents who do not have this education be able to assist their children? Reading for meaning. Establish a presidential task team of independent experts to implement national reading plan. Allocate a sufficient budget for reading interventions and resource in foundation phase classrooms. Ensure that foundational phase teachers receive training on teaching children how to read meaningfully at least once every quarter. Provide access to parental reading training initiatives to empower parents to help their children read for meaning. Create a culture of reading, launching community reading programs. Okay, so now obviously it continues as I have said. Now we already have reached the 45th minute. There's no way I'm going to do all of this. Just like I didn't do the EFF and the ANC's all manifestos, even with the ACDP. The problem is time, and there's a lot in these, and sometimes you feel that a lot of information has just been thrown in there. Whilst I must be honest with you, I have not felt like that with the Action SA's manifesto. I felt like that with the ANC's manifesto. I felt like that with the EFF's manifesto. So here we are, guys. What do you think so far concerning what you have come across? It seems to me like a very good manifesto. It lacks certain things here and there that would have given clarity to an individual who really is interested in knowing where is the money going to come from. We don't want to be caught by surprise by a free market economy that has got ridiculous tax brackets. In any case, if such eventuality does materialize, there will be a mass exodus of all those of us who are professionals in the country into greener pastures, isn't it? Hopefully, that would not be the case. I love their manifesto in how they are going to create employment, how they are going to infuse infrastructure development, and how they are going to combine that rural development in terms of infrastructure so as to enable them to sell their goods and their agricultural farming through to their markets, through the rail network. This obviously talks to also removing the many trucks that are on our roads. It removes the time spent on the goods between their production and the actual market where they are supposed to be sold. So thereby reducing lead time. I love their projection of the jobs and how they are going to grow the economy by how much year on year. That is obviously something that all individuals who deal with economic growth actually do, so as to assess themselves from time to time. How far did we fall? Did we achieve our target? What can we do better? Can we improve? And so on and so forth. We will obviously be here if they win the elections. If they were to win the elections or get a sizable number to run a particular province, whatever the case may be, we will be here to see them implementing this, and we'll be able to critique them. But as for me, the only thing that is a downer here is the fact that they want to implement the UBs and they want to keep the grants. If that was for temporary measure, which they did not indicate, that is for temporary measure. But I get from their job creation that the grants will be a thing of the past by 2030, if indeed those jobs are created, because there'll be more jobs rather than people who depends on grants. That's the positive that, in my view, weighs out against the communist ideology. It does, however, sound like something that has been borrowed from the communists. You may want to correct me in the comments down below to clarify for me. For example, looking at the person of Mashaba, having listened to most of his speeches that he has done, I can come to a conclusion that there is not one single communist bone in himself. He hates communism with passion as much as I do. And for me, for that reason alone, I may consider voting for a political party like him. But up until now, the best manifesto I have seen is the ACDP. I would say this would be the second to that. We'll check the DA and see how is the DA manifesto. You tell me what you think down below. Up until then, guys, ciao, ciao. Enjoy your decision making as to who you are going to vote for. Please use your vote responsibly. Your decision will either usher in a democracy that will give us economic growth, or it will usher in a communist state that will kill our economy and fail our country dismally into a Zimbabwe, into a Venezuela, into what we see in Cuba. Up until then, see you in the next video. Like the video, Subscribe if you have not subscribed, and share it with whomsoever you believe will benefit from it. And give me the comments down below if you understand better the UBs that they are talking about and why they need to keep the grant. Okay, ciao, ciao.